My name is Alara, and I remember the sound of the Nasdaq bell. It was a clear metallic ring that echoed through the vast hall, a sound that crowned a decade of relentless work, of late nights and early mornings, of a partnership that was both a marriage and a business empire. I stood beside Julian, my husband, my co-founder, the man who was supposed to be my sisters. The lights were blinding, the applause a roaring wave, but in that pinnacle of success, a cold, hollow space had lived inside me for years. Julian's heart had never fully been mine. It had always held a shrine to his first love, to my sister, Celeste. Then I was reborn. The memory of the bell faded, replaced by the sharp, acidic sound of Celeste's voice. And I want nothing to do with you or your family. This engagement is over. We were in the lavish drawing room of the Sterling mansion. My adoptive parents, Arthur and Beatrice Vance, stood frozen. Julian Landon and his father, Mr. Landon, wore expressions of thunderous shock. Celeste, beautiful and brash, had just publicly and brutally broken off her engagement to the most eligible heir in the city. I, Alara, the quiet, studious adopted daughter, watched from the sidelines, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. I had lived this before. I knew what came next. The Landons left with stiff, formal goodbyes, their pride in tatters. The moment the door closed, the room erupted. "Have you lost your mind?" Arthur Vance roared, his face purpling. That was Julian Landon. "Do you have any idea what you've just thrown away?" But Celeste wasn't listening. A terrifying realization had dawned in her eyes, a horror I recognized all too well. She had been reborn too. She knew the future she had just obliterated, the golden life I had lived in her stead. "No," she whispered, her face bleaching of all color. "No, no, no." Ignoring our father's fury and our mother's panicked pleas, she spun on her heel, not even bothering with her shoes, and fled the room, running barefoot down the marble driveway after the Landons' car. I followed at a slower pace, a ghost from a future that was now unraveling. I saw her catch up to them halfway down the street. "Julian. Mr. Landon." "Wait," she cried, her voice choked with tears. "What I said, it was nonsense. I was out of my mind. Please, I don't want to call off the engagement." Mr. Landon's voice was icy. "Celeste Vance, I heard you perfectly. You said our family was beneath you. The engagement is terminated." Then something strange happened. Flickering lines of text, like subtitles from a forgotten movie, scrolled at the edge of my vision. "Our poor Celeste. Look at her, she's so desperate. She was just young and confused in her past life. Julian, forgive her. This is so much more dramatic than the last timeline." I blinked and the text vanished. Was I hallucinating? Was this part of being reborn? Celeste, meanwhile, was resorting to desperate measures. "I'll punish myself. I'll make it up to you," she declared, and before anyone could stop her, she began slapping her own face hard. The sharp cracks echoed in the quiet street. "Julian, I really like you. I just didn't think it through." Born into wealth and coddled her entire life, Celeste had never debased herself like this. The Landons were stunned. Julian, dressed in a dark jacket that made him look heartbreakingly young, stared at her, his lips pressed into a tight line. The unseen text flickered again. "Oh, the heroine is suffering. Her face is so red. Julian, say something. Hold her." As if commanded, Julian's resolve broke. He surged forward and grabbed her wrists, pulling her into his arms. "Fine," he murmured into her hair, his voice thick with emotion. "We won't break off the engagement." He held her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. And in that moment I knew. The script had been flipped. In this life, Celeste would fight with everything she had to keep the man she had once thrown away. The comments surged one last time. "Yes. The OTP is saved. Now the real villain, Alara, can't steal him away. Let's see the adopted sister try to worm her way in now." I turned and walked back inside, a cold calm settling over me. They could have their dramatic reunion. I had seen the full arc of that story. I knew the hidden costs of being Julian Landon's wife, the shadow of a first love that never faded. In this life I wanted something different. I wanted a life that was entirely, unequivocally my own. My first step was the National Math Olympiad. In my last life I had failed to place. But that was before years of navigating the brutal logic of Silicon Valley, of building a company from the ground up. A high school math competition? It was a puzzle, not a pinnacle. Back at school, I overheard Celeste gossiping with her friends. If Alara actually wins and gets direct admission to Stanford, I'll stand on my head and eat my textbook. The comments flitted by. Our Celeste is so cute. Of course she won't succeed. Alara didn't in the last life either. I didn't react. But a quiet fire ignited within me. They were all so sure of the old timeline, so confident in my designated role as the overlooked supporting character. After school, I saw Julian waiting at the gate for Celeste. She preened, applying lip gloss before skipping out to meet him. I turned and went the other way, climbing the stairs to the deserted rooftop seeking solitude. Instead, I found a girl crying. Her sobs were ragged, painful. He was on the phone. The machine malfunctioned and his hand was torn off. The boss ran away. He won't pay a cent. Mom, we can't afford my tuition. I understand. But I won't study anymore. My heart clenched. I knew that voice. I knew that face, though it was years younger than when I'd last seen it. Why not study? I said softly. She jumped, whirling around, quickly wiping her tears. Who are you? I'm Alara Vance. You're Maya, right? Looking at her, this brilliant, broken girl who had been one of my most loyal lieutenants in another life. A wave of purpose washed over me. My rebirth wasn't just about avoiding my past mistakes. It was about rectifying others. You mean you want to sponsor me? Maya asked, her voice laced with disbelief. The comments predictably were cynical. Is this side character kidding? Alara's family doesn't even give her spending money. She's just a broke adopted kid. Where would she get that kind of cash? I didn't answer. I simply took her to a nearby bank. I slid my card into the ATM and entered my password. Count the numbers, I told her. Her eyes widened, reflecting the screen's glow. The balance was clear. 1,687,452.50. The unseen text exploded. Oh my God. Over $1 million. How does an 18-year-old have that much? That's impossible. The Vance family would never. Did she sell herself? She's pretty. Scholarships, I explained calmly, answering Maya's unspoken question. Freelance coding since high school. I saved every penny. This money was my freedom, my secret weapon, painstakingly accumulated over 2 lifetimes. Maya's look of shock slowly morphed into one of awe. But I can't accept this. We're strangers. I took her hand. It was cold and trembling. Now we're not. Knowing your situation, I can't just stand by. Give me a chance to help you so you won't live with regrets. Okay. I remembered the brilliant tech lead Maya became, and the deep, lingering shame she carried for not having a college degree. That regret ended now. Tears welled in her eyes again, but this time they were tears of hope. She threw her arms around me, sobbing into my shoulder. Thank you. Thank you so much. I withdrew 80,000 yuan for her annual tuition. As she clutched the bag of cash, a small, genuine smile touched my lips. This, changing a life for the better, building my own team, felt more real and more powerful than any memory of standing by Julian's side. The game had changed and I was no longer playing by the old rules. The next morning I walked into my classroom to find chaos. Ben, the class treasurer, was frantically searching through his bag, his face ashen. It's gone, he cried, his voice cracking. I put the class funds right here last night. 30,000 yuan. I was going to give it to the teacher this morning. Whoever took it, please just give it back. This is serious. A nervous murmur rippled through the room. 30,000 yuan was no small sum. It was enough to ruin someone's future. One by one my classmates began to deny involvement. I left early yesterday. It wasn't me. I don't know anything about it. Then I felt a finger pointed directly at me. Celeste's voice, sharp and accusatory, cut through the noise. It was Alara. She stole the money. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to me. Yesterday I saw her handing a huge stack of cash to some girl near the school, Celeste declared, her eyes gleaming with false righteousness. It had to be tens of thousands. Where else would she get that kind of money? The unseen comments erupted in a frenzy. Wait, did the villainess really steal the money? But we saw her with Maya. That was her own money. Celeste doesn't know that though. Her suspicion makes sense. I stood my ground, my voice calm and steady. I did not steal the money. Celeste sneered, emboldened by the attention. Just saying it doesn't make it true. Show us proof. A cold smile touched my lips. Proof? I would give them more than proof. I pulled out my phone, my movements deliberate. The keypad beeped loudly in the tense silence. Hello, is this 110? I said, my voice clear and projected. I want to report a crime. I am being falsely accused of stealing 30,000 yuan at Oak Ridge High School. Celeste's face went bone white. She hadn't expected this. He thought I would crumble, plead, try to explain myself. She never imagined I would bring in the police over a school matter. Elara, it's not that serious, one of my classmates whispered nervously. The comments scrolled, a mix of outrage and shock. She called the police on her own sister. What a snake. After the Vances raised her for over 10 years. So ungrateful. This is exactly what a villainess would do, try to send the heroine to jail. I met Celeste's terrified gaze. She falsely accused me without a shred of evidence. I am using the law to protect my rights. What's wrong with that? Who else but the police can prove my innocence? From my perspective, I had walked into class and been immediately slandered. Who could stay calm in that situation? And when Celeste pointed her finger at me, did she ever consider I was her sister? It seemed that only a handful of the scrolling comments saw the logic in my actions. The police arrived swiftly. After hearing the account, the lead officer turned a stern gaze on Celeste. Miss Celeste Vance, can you take responsibility for your words? False accusations and slander can carry criminal liability. Celeste's confidence, which had been built on a foundation of entitlement, began to crumble. I'm not completely sure, she stammered. I just saw her with the money. The officers, preferring to handle the matter without escalating it for a group of elite students on the cusp of their college entrance exams, looked at me. Perhaps an internal resolution would be best. I nodded. Then I want a public apology. Celeste's face flushed a deep, mortified crimson. I just wasn't certain it was you, she muttered, her eyes downcast. But I really did see you hand a large amount of cash to a girl. Just then a small, timid voice spoke from the doorway. It was me. Maya stepped into the classroom, her shoulders hunched but her chin held high. The entire class, including me, stared in surprise. I knew how much courage it took for her, always so quiet and timid, to speak up in a room full of our wealthy, judgmental peers. My family is poor. I couldn't afford tuition, Maya explained, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. Elara found out and used her own savings to help me. I can testify. The money she gave me wasn't the class funds. It was hers. A collective gasp went through the room. Celeste looked furious, her carefully constructed accusation falling apart. That doesn't prove anything, she snapped. The class funds were 30,000. How do we know that's not what she gave you? Officer, I said lazily, and Celeste immediately fell silent, fear flashing in her eyes. She didn't dare continue her speculation with the police present. Instead of arguing over whether I stole the money, I continued, wouldn't it be better to actually find it? Let's see whose hands the money ended up in. The officers agreed and went to check the surveillance footage, only to discover the classroom cameras had been mysteriously disabled the previous night. For a moment the investigation stalled. Why not check everyone's backpacks and desks? I suggested. I think it's highly likely the thief is one of our own classmates. The officer gave me a curious look. Why do you say that? I smiled. The class monitor put the funds in his bag, planning to hand them in the next day. I assume he was waiting for some students who hadn't paid yet. Not many people knew the money was there, which makes it very likely the culprit is in this very room. As I spoke, I saw Celeste's face turn chalk white, her body beginning to tremble slightly. The puzzle pieces clicked into place. This explained why this incident hadn't happened in my previous life. In this new timeline, Celeste's desperate need for control and her jealousy had driven her to a new low. The police began their search, having students step into the hallway as they checked each backpack. The tension was palpable. When they reached Celeste's designer bag, a black pouch tumbled out. Inside was exactly 30,000 yuan. The classroom erupted. I looked at my sister, my expression cool. No wonder you tried to pin it on me. You needed a scapegoat. Celeste was shaking, her eyes wide with panic. No, it wasn't me. I just didn't have time to, she cut herself off, then quickly switched to her default arrogant tone. Look at my shoes. They're a limited edition collaboration, 28,000 yuan. This watch cost 180,000. Why would I need to steal class funds? Everyone knew her family was wealthy. Seemed absurd. That's not certain, I countered calmly. Maybe you spent too lavishly and ran out. Or maybe you slandered me and tried to frame me by shoving the money into my desk, but didn't have time because I called the police. I suspect the moment I made that call, you panicked and slipped up. Celeste's composure shattered. She burst into theatrical tears. I don't know how that got there. Someone must be trying to frame me. I'm innocent. Our homeroom teacher, Mr. Davis, stepped forward, his face weary. He had enjoyed many expensive dinners courtesy of Arthur and Beatrice Vance. All right, since the money has been found, let's put this matter to rest. Lara, Celeste is your sister. Don't pursue this further. Just have her apologize. The old Alaire might have relented. The new one would not. The apology, I said firmly, has to come from the person involved. Celeste's face twisted with hatred and humiliation, but under the gaze of the police and our teacher she had no choice. She gritted her teeth, her voice a barely audible mutter. I'm sorry. The comments were a storm of conflicting opinions. Doesn't anyone else think Alaire looks cheap chasing this so hard? The heroine's been pushed to tears. What more does she want? Some of you sound like you never finished middle school. The real victim here is Alaire. The bell for gym class rang, scattering the crowd. As we filed out, I saw Julian waiting in the hallway. The moment Celeste saw him, she transformed. She rushed to him, throwing herself into his arms, sobbing as if her heart would break. I feel so wronged, she wailed. Over such a small amount. Would I really need to steal? And yet no one believed me. Julian held her, his voice soft. I'm sorry. I came too late. He gently wiped the tears from her cheeks. I believe you. But I knew the truth. I had seen him standing in the back of the crowd earlier, watching the entire drama unfold. When our eyes had met for a split second, I'd seen a flicker of confusion in his gaze, as if the script I was following was all wrong. He had seen enough to know her apology was warranted, yet here he was, comforting her. He believed the image she projected, not the reality he had witnessed. It was a pattern I knew all too well. I turned away, taking Maya's hand. Let's go. The incident didn't weigh on me. I had more important things to focus on. My guaranteed admission to Stanford was officially confirmed, but I asked the teacher to keep it quiet. I continued attending school, my real purpose to tutor Maya, to help her shore up her weaknesses in language and English. You're a genius in math and science, I told her one afternoon in the library, pointing at her dismal literature essay. I can't even compare. But look at these scores. Even if you test well, you'll only get into a lower-tier school. Is that what you want? Maya sniffled, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. She cried often out of frustration, but she never gave up. Every day she memorized vocabulary and gathered essay phrases with a determination that awed me. The comments watching our progress began to shift. Knife-like words, but a tofu-soft heart. Alaire is kind of cute sometimes. She's actually a really good teacher. Time flew by. The air grew thick with the tension of impending exams. I was building my own future brick by brick, and the first and most crucial pillar was standing beside me, her nose buried in a book, fighting for her own chance. We were no longer damsel and savior. We were partners. And our partnership was just beginning. The morning of the college entrance exams, the Vance household was a portrait of controlled chaos. Beatrice Vance, my adoptive mother, handed me a leather pencil case with a tight, practiced smile. Everything you need is in there, Alaire. Good luck. I unzipped it to perform my usual check. My blood ran cold. It's missing. Her face froze. What's missing? My exam admission ticket. Panic, too sharp and immediate to be entirely fake, flashed in her eyes. She snatched the bag from me, her fingers trembling as she rummaged through it. Oh no, how could this happen? I swear I was careful with it. Across the room, Celeste smugly pulled her own ticket from her bag, waving it like a flag of victory. Mom, she just didn't keep it safe. How can she blame you? It's all her fault. And now it's too late to get a reprint. She'll have to repeat a year. He shot me a venomous look. Repeating at a prep school costs a fortune. Why should we waste that money on her? The unseen comments flickered with a mix of pity and schadenfreude. Alara already has guaranteed admission. It doesn't really matter, but still, what a shame. She worked so hard only to be sabotaged by her own family. Our Celeste is just stating the facts. Alara is so careless. I didn't engage. I simply got into the car, closed my eyes and leaned back in the seat, my face a mask of calm. Celeste's sneer was a physical presence in the confined space. How can you even qualify to take the exam? If you can't even keep track of your ticket, you should just get out of the car. I remained silent, the ghost of a smile playing on my lips. The car pulled up to the exam site, a sea of anxious students and hopeful parents. I stepped out into the bright morning light. And there she was. Maya was waiting at the gate, her face pinched with worry until she saw me. Her eyes lit up and she rushed forward. "I've been waiting forever," she breathed. "Oh, and I managed to get your admission ticket reissued, just like you asked me to beforehand." She handed me the crisp, official paper. "Did you really lose yours?" I took the ticket, a genuine smile finally reaching my eyes. "Yes. Thank you." She grinned, the tension leaving her shoulders. "Why are you being so formal with me? But seriously, how did you know your ticket would go missing?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Behind me, I heard Beatrice Vance's sharp intake of breath, her head bowing in shame. In the reflection of the car window, I saw Celeste's triumphant expression shatter, her fists clenching so tightly her knuckles were white. The comments went wild. "Wait, she planned for this. Don't tell me the heroine instructed her mother to do this." Stepping outside the plot's halo for a moment. Alara's life is really tragic. No parents, foster parents who barely support her, and she still outsmarted them. It was true. I had been an orphan since birth. Arthur and Beatrice Vance had adopted me from an orphanage after years of childless marriage. But the very next year their miracle Celeste was born. I became a living reminder of their infertility, a placeholder who had overstayed her welcome. They had provided food and shelter for over a decade, and for that I was grateful. But I had never dared expect their love. Now I didn't need it. The exam results were released in a whirlwind. I scored 728 points, becoming the top scorer in the entire province. When the news broke that I had also won first prize in the National Math Olympiad and had already secured guaranteed admission to Stanford, the internet exploded. The comments section beneath the news article was a flood of awe. So this is what a real genius looks like. Even with guaranteed admission, she casually takes the test and becomes the provincial champion? God tier. I bow to you. I was satisfied, but my greater pride was in Maya's score. Thanks to a year of relentless tutoring, she had made a dramatic turnaround in her weak subjects, scoring 693 points in total. Getting into Stanford was now a certainty for her too. The moment she saw her results on the screen, she threw her arms around me, her whole body trembling with sobbing, joyful relief. "Thank you," she choked out over and over. "Thank you. Thank you." Half a year ago she had been a girl on a rooftop ready to give up her future. Now she was Stanford-bound. I held her, my voice soft but firm. "You should thank yourself for not giving up. You've always been outstanding." In this life she would never have to carry the regret of a lost education. The comments witnessing this were overwhelmingly positive. "So amazing. This is what girl helps girl looks like." She came back reborn and rewrote both her own life and her best friend's. This is what a real heroine is. The celebration, however, was short-lived. At home the atmosphere was toxic. In my last life, under parental pressure, Celeste had at least scored over 500 points. In this one, consumed by her obsession with Julian, she had barely scraped past 400. "I'm going to Stanford," she shrieked at our father in the living room. "I don't care if Alara can go. Why can't I?" Arthur Vance, his face mottled with anger, slammed his hand on the table. "Alara scored 728. And you? Did you even manage 428? Celeste pouted, "A child denied a toy. Then donate a building. It's only a few tens of millions. Wouldn't that get me in?" She said it as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The entitlement in her voice was staggering. The comments buzzed. "Yes. Let the heroine show the side character what real capital looks like." What Alara worked for with sweat and tears, Celeste was simply born into. But Arthur Vance was not amused. He was enraged by her arrogance. "Do you think a few tens of millions are so easy to come by? How could I have raised such a disgrace of a daughter? Though he ultimately intended to donate, he couldn't stand her attitude. For the first time in her charmed life, Celeste received a harsh, stinging slap from our father. The sound echoed through the opulent house. Even so, just like in the previous timeline, my parents wrote the check. Money, it seemed, could still buy Celeste's way. The day before we were to leave for Stanford, Arthur took me aside. His expression was stern, devoid of the pride he should have felt for a daughter who was the provincial champion. "Elara," he said, his voice heavy with duty, not affection. "Look after your sister at school. She may be useless, but she's still my daughter." He paused, and his next words were a deliberate, cold blade. "Unlike you. You were adopted." The comment section for a moment turned soft. Suddenly I feel a little bad for Elara. What did she ever do wrong? She just wanted to live better by her own effort. Not everyone is born with the halo of the heroine. In Elara, I see the reflection of every ordinary person who works hard just to survive. His words should have hurt. Once they would have. But now they just felt like a final, formal severance. I simply nodded, my heart a shielded fortress. At Stanford, I didn't wait for anyone. I went straight to the library, found a quiet corner, and opened my textbooks. My workload was self-imposed and heavy. In this temple of geniuses, I would not just survive, I would dominate. It was in this very library, in my last life, that I had first met Julian properly. We had become study partners, then business partners, then life partners. It was where he began to fall for me. As if summoned by my memories, I saw him enter the library one evening, the grand sunset painting the shelves in hues of rose and gold. He saw me bent over my notes in the twilight, and for a moment he looked dazed, as if he had lived this scene before. He walked toward me, an unreadable emotion in his eyes. "Are you?" he began. But Celeste, who had been trailing him, quickly cut in, linking her arm possessively through his. "Julian, there are plenty of girls studying here. Let's not disturb anyone." I looked up, meeting both their gazes. A familiar, weary irritation flickered in my chest. Julian's eyes widened in surprise. "She's your sister?" Celeste forced a bright, brittle smile. "Oh, Elara. I almost didn't recognize you." I nodded, closed my book, and began packing my things. "I've got something else to do. I'll head out first." The comments scrolled as I walked away. Is it just me, or does Elara seem different from before? In the end, it's still about the male lead. Too bad he's destined for the heroine. The evening breeze lifted the hem of my skirt as I stepped outside. It carried with it the scent of eucalyptus and a profound sense of déjà vu. In my last life, Julian and I had walked together for decades. To outsiders, I was the adopted daughter who, through sheer grit and intellect, had earned a place at his side. But I was the only one who knew the truth. In Julian's heart, he had never forgotten Celeste. They were childhood sweethearts, heirs to matching empires. He carried a natural, effortless exclusivity. He had let her know the passcode to our smart lock, welcomed her unannounced visits, forgotten my birthday but never hers. I had caught him staring at a hair tie she left behind, had heard him murmur her name in his sleep. In this life, before I could even cross paths with him, I had already seen her holding his hand with intimate familiarity, had witnessed them kissing in the garden. Perhaps this time he would finally be able to make up for the regrets of his last life. And I would be free of them both. I quickened my pace. My future was not in this library, not in the shadow of a man. It was in the company I would build, the empire I would forge with my own two hands. The first chapter of my new life was over. The real story was about to begin. By the second semester of my sophomore year, the restless energy that had fueled my previous life's success was bubbling to the surface once more. Academia, while stimulating, was no longer enough. I needed to build, to create, to test the mettle of my newfound resolve in the real world. I found Maya in the computer lab, her brow furrowed in concentration as lines of code scrolled across her screen. "I have an idea," I said, pulling up a chair. Her eyes never left the monitor. "Is it bigger than the last one? The library database optimization you proposed nearly gave me an aneurysm." "Bigger," I confirmed. "A platform for collaborative academic research. A centralized, intelligent hub that connects data, methodologies, and researchers across disciplines. Right now it's a fragmented mess." She finally turned to look at me, a familiar spark of challenge in her gaze. I laid out the blueprint. The architecture, the potential for machine learning integration, the gaping hole in the market. I spoke of the late nights and the impossible deadlines not as a threat, but as a promise. When I finished, she was silent for a moment. Then a slow smile spread across her face. I'm in. But we need more people. Talented people. Then let's find them, I said. We posted discreet recruitment notices on departmental boards, looking for like-minded partners, emphasizing ambition over pedigree. The response was tepid at first. Then on the third day he walked in. Julian Landon was the third person to arrive for an interview. He looked older than the boy from the school gates, more polished, but the same intense energy radiated from him. He handed me his resume. It was predictably impeccable. Student council president, internships at prestigious firms, a string of academic awards. The other two team members, a sharp-eyed economics major named Liam and a brilliantly pragmatic bioinformatician named Chloe, were visibly impressed. They looked at me waiting for my verdict. My heart was a cold, still stone in my chest. This was the crossroads I had feared, the moment the past tried to force its way back into my future. To refuse him would be personal suspicious. To accept him was to invite the very drama I had sworn to avoid. I looked at his resume, then at him. Your credentials are impressive, I said, my voice neutral. The team seems to agree. Welcome aboard. He smiled, a flash of the charm that had once swayed me. Thank you, Alara. From now on you're my boss. Please guide me well. His eyes shone with a disconcerting brightness, and for a treacherous second, I was thrown back to a different lifetime, to a cramped dorm room where we had sketched our first business plan on a whiteboard, our dreams intertwining with the scent of cheap coffee and limitless ambition. Don't be so formal, upperclassman, I replied, layering the title with a deliberate, professional distance. At that exact moment I saw her. Celeste was standing at the conference room door, her face a thundercloud of fury. But the instant Julian turned towards her, her expression underwent a terrifyingly swift transformation. The storm cleared, replaced by a dazzling, adoring smile. Julian, my fiancé, she chirped, skipping into the room as if she owned it. Why don't we go grocery shopping together? I'll cook dinner for you tonight. Julian rubbed his temples, a gesture of weariness I knew intimately. Didn't I tell you not to come looking for me here? By our second year, Celeste's possessiveness was campus legend. She demanded constant location updates, viewed any female within a 10-foot radius of Julian as a threat, and clung to him with the desperation of someone who knew on some level that what she held was borrowed. The comments, ever present, debated her tactics. If I had such a controlling girlfriend, I would have broken up ages ago. The male lead is so patient. It's impressive. Honestly, he and the heroine were meant to be. Just endure it. The school provided us with a sparse but functional office space in the entrepreneurship building. It became our sanctuary, a place humming with the electric energy of a shared mission. Liam crunched numbers, Chloe built robust data models, Maya was the architectural genius holding the entire digital edifice together, and I orchestrated it all. Julian, to his credit, was a capable and driven worker, his business acumen as sharp as ever. But his phone was a constant source of discord. It would ring and he'd step into the hallway, but Celeste's voice, shrill and accusatory, would inevitably pierce the silence. Don't tell me you're at the company again. Company? My foot. You just wanted to see Alara, didn't you? You still like her. You talk to her about ideals and ambition, but you never say a word like that to me. You're impossible. Most calls ended with him returning, jaw tight, the productive atmosphere shattered. The rest of us learned to work through it, our shared glances speaking volumes. We were building something meaningful, and his personal life was a chaotic vortex trying to pull it all down. Time slipped into late autumn. One afternoon, Celeste swept into our office carrying a wicker basket, a triumphant smile on her face. Visits from family and friends weren't explicitly forbidden, so no one could formally object. Sweetheart, she cooed, zeroing in on Julian. It's your birthday today. I came to celebrate with you. She pulled out a lopsided frosted cake from the basket. Look, I baked it myself. Julian didn't look up from his screen, his voice flat. I'm busy, Celeste. And I told you my birthday isn't important. I don't need to celebrate. How could we not? She insisted, her voice taking on a wheedling tone. I've always wanted to give you the warmth of a real home. Just then Maya needed Julian's input on a critical server configuration. He excused himself and followed her to the server rack in the corner, relief evident in his posture. The rest of us tried to ignore Celeste as she fussed, setting the cake on Julian's desk and digging around for a candle. The air grew thick with the cloying scent of vanilla frosting and her simmering resentment. No one could have predicted what happened next. Julian returned 5 minutes later to a scene of chaos. A small but fierce fire was raging on his desk, fueled by spilled papers and the synthetic wood laminate. The little birthday candle had tipped over. The flames licked hungrily at the stack of blueprints he had spent weeks perfecting, intricate hand-annotated schematics for the second phase of our platform. The edges of Chloe's research notes were already curling into black ash. Celeste was standing back, her hands over her mouth, not helping, just watching. "I just wanted to celebrate your birthday," she wailed. "I never thought the candle would tip over." Her eyes darted around, looking for a scapegoat. Who opened the window? It's all their fault. But the true heroine of the hour was Maya. While the rest of us were frozen in shock, she sprinted across the room, wrestled the fire extinguisher from its bracket, and efficiently smothered the flames in a cloud of white powder. The fire was out in seconds, but the damage was done. Weeks of work were irreparably damaged. In the sudden, stark silence, Julian looked at me, his face pale with horror. "President Alara, I really didn't know my girlfriend would." I cut him off. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like a shard of ice. "Julian, this time your mistake, your lack of control over a situation you repeatedly allowed into our workspace, has cost the company dearly. You know the blueprints everyone worked on for nights on end can't be measured by money alone." I looked at the charred remains on his desk, then back at his stricken face. "And though you've worked hard here, clearly your personal life is interfering with your judgment and the safety of our project." I took a steadying breath, the weight of my decision final. "You're fired." The word hung in the chemical-scented air. He stared at me, shattered, the boy who had once stood beside me at the pinnacle of success, now being dismissed from a startup by the woman who had been his wife. The comments buzzed with a mixture of shock and grim satisfaction. He might not have contributed much, but he worked hard. That was harsh. Alara was really merciless. I felt no pleasure in it, only a necessary surgical finality. This was the clean break I should have made a lifetime ago. He left without another word. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. The very next day he was back. He was still in the same clothes, his hair disheveled, but his demeanor was completely transformed. The shame was gone, replaced by a wild, electrifying excitement. He strode into my office, his eyes locking onto mine with an unnerving intensity. "Alara," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "It's me. I can't believe you actually founded your own company. You're only a junior now, right? You're even more amazing than I imagined." My blood ran cold. I knew that look. I knew that tone. "Now that I'm back," he continued, a triumphant smile spreading across his face as if he had solved an impossible equation, "let me join you. Give me the president's position. Let's keep working together like in our last life." The world tilted on its axis. He was reborn. I stared at him, my mind racing, recalculating every interaction we'd had since my rebirth. The confusion in his eyes in the classroom, the dazed look in the library. It wasn't just déjà vu. He remembered. He remembered everything. And he thought that changed anything. I rose from my chair, my voice dangerously even. "Julian, I was the one who fired you. I know it was Celeste's fault," he said quickly, dismissively. "And I scolded her, but Alara, I'm not the same person I was. Have you forgotten?" He took a step closer, his gaze pleading. "Have you forgotten how in our last life I was the one who led the company to success and took it public?" The audacity of it, the sheer, unvarnished ego, was breathtaking. He was trying to claim credit for my life's work. "I remember perfectly," I replied, my words like chips of ice. "But I'm not the same person I was either." He gaped, speechless. The comments erupted. "Oh my God, that felt so good. She doesn't need a man. Her strength is her own." Seeing that his skills weren't enough to sway me, he switched tactics, his voice dropping into a sentimental, intimate register. "But Alara, I'm your husband. In our last life we walked through decades together. We were one. I never thought of leaving you." I met his gaze, unflinching. But I'm guessing you haven't broken up with Celeste, have you? He faltered. If you'd truly moved on, I continued, my voice cold and precise, you wouldn't just say you scolded her. You would have ended it. The comments solidified, the tide turning decisively. This guy wants both sides. Eating from one bowl while staring at the pot. Shameless. I took a step toward him, finally giving voice to the poison that had festered in me for a lifetime. Julian, you never knew. You never knew that every time I saw you staring blankly at Celeste's hair tie, I thought of divorce. After we married, I once found an old iron box while cleaning. Inside were all of her things. Her hair ties, her love letters, her clips, even her signed notes. I let the memory hang in the air, raw and painful. At that moment, even someone as rational as me couldn't help but lose myself, wondering what love really was. His expression crumbled into panic. Elara, that's why this life. It's better if nothing between us even begins, I finished for him, my resolve absolute. It's better for both of us. I don't need to endure what I did in the last life. All of it just to keep my place. I turned to Liam, who was standing frozen by the door. Please escort Mr. Landon out. And inform security he is not to be allowed back in. As he was led away, sputtering protests, I felt not a shred of victory, but a profound and liberating silence. The final ghost of my past had been exorcised. The path ahead was now truly my own. The silence in the office after Julian was gone was profound. It wasn't just an absence of sound. It was the absence of a gravitational pull that had for 2 lifetimes subtly warped the space around me. Liam, Chloe, and Maya looked at me, a mixture of shock and unspoken questions in their eyes. They hadn't understood the full context of our exchange, but they had felt its seismic finality. All right, I said, my voice cutting through the tension. The distraction is gone. Chloe, what's the damage assessment on the data models? The spell was broken. We were a team again, focused on the work. The charred blueprints were a setback, not a catastrophe. We had digital backups, and Maya's quick action had saved the server. We worked late into the night, the shared purpose a balm on the day's chaos. I ordered dinner for everyone, and as we ate takeout surrounded by lines of code, a new, stronger cohesion settled over us. We were the ones who had stayed. We were the core. 3 months later, the news trickled through the campus grapevine. Julian had finally broken up with Celeste. The story was that her suffocating possessiveness had become too much, that the fire in the office was the final straw. The comments section, which had been so divided, now seemed to reach a consensus. Finally. He should have done that ages ago. I guess even the male lead has his limits. Poor Celeste, she loved him too much. I didn't spare it much thought. Their drama was no longer my concern. My company, which we had named Ethel, was gaining traction. We secured our first round of seed funding from an angel investor who was impressed not by flashy pedigrees, but by our clean code and our user growth metrics. The money wasn't from the Landons or the Van Cess. It was ours. It was around this time that my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but a gut instinct made me pick up. Elara? It's Arthur Vance. My adoptive father's voice was strained, older than I remembered. It's your sister. There's been an incident. At the house. She was screaming about the breakup, about you. And I collapsed. The doctors say it was a stress-induced cardiac event. I'm all right, but we're at Stanford Medical. A cold dread that had nothing to do with affection for Celeste washed over me. The script was repeating itself. In the last life, her scheming with Ray Henderson had driven him to his death. In this one, her obsession with Julian was achieving the same result, just slower. I'll be there, I said, my voice flat. When I arrived, the scene was a grim parody of my past life. Arthur lay in the hospital bed, looking frail and diminished. Beatrice was weeping quietly by his side. And Celeste was standing in the corner, her arms crossed, her face a mask of defiant self-pity. Elara, Beatrice whispered, her eyes red-rimmed. She rushed to me, clutching my hands. Thank goodness you're here. The doctors said it was close. If it weren't for you. I frowned. For me. Your donation, she said, confused. To the cardiac unit here last year. They had a new piece of equipment, experimental. They used it on your father. The head of the department recognized your name from the plaque. I had completely forgotten. A portion of Ethel's first significant revenue had been quietly directed here, a strategic investment in cutting-edge medical technology. It was a calculated move, part of building a robust network, but I hadn't anticipated it would one day save the man who had once told me I was not his real daughter. I extracted my hands from Beatrice's grip and walked to Arthur's bedside. He looked up at me, his eyes clouded with pain and medication, but also with a dawning, uncomfortable shame. "Elara," he rasped. I didn't say anything. I simply pulled a sleek, black bank card from my wallet and placed it on the bedside table. "What's this?" Beatrice asked. "From now on," I said, my voice calm and devoid of emotion, "I'll have my assistant deposit a monthly sum into that account. It should be more than enough to cover your living expenses and any medical care you might need." Beatrice looked horrified, then embarrassed. "Oh no, that's too much. There's no need. We have money." "This is what a daughter should do," I replied, the words ritualistic, empty of the warmth they should have carried. Arthur's eyes closed as if in pain. Beatrice stammered, "Elara, what are you saying?" I looked at her, my gaze steady. "Tell me, Beatrice. Was it really just an accident that my exam admission ticket went missing?" Her face, already pale, turned a deathly white. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. The guilt was a physical presence in the room. I continued softly, the final piece of the puzzle clicking into place. "Then why did I find the shredded remains of it in the toilet tank the night I came home?" A small, choked gasp escaped her. She had no defense. The last vestige of the illusion of family shattered into a million silent pieces. I only smiled faintly. "From now on I won't be coming back home. Don't try to contact me again." I turned to leave. I was grateful for the adoption, for the roof and the food. But in that house I had never felt like I belonged. The monthly payments were the fullest, most transactional repayment I could give them. It was clean. It was fair. "Wait." Celeste's voice, sharp with rage, echoed in the sterile hallway. I stopped but didn't turn around. She caught up to me, grabbing my arm and spinning me around. Her beautiful face was contorted with a fury so deep it was almost tragic. "Why?" she demanded, her voice a raw scrape. "Why is the ending still the same in this life? I made different choices. I fought for him. I did everything right. But he still left me. Dad still got sick. Nothing changed." She was finally seeing the bars of her gilded cage. She had thought Rebirth was a cheat code, a way to reclaim the prize she had foolishly discarded. She never understood that the prize itself was flawed, and that the real game was being played on a different board entirely. "Elara, I admit it," she cried, tears of frustration now mixing with her anger. "I've always been jealous of you. In the last life you were like the heroine of some novel. Stanford, Julian, the company, you had it all. And you didn't even want him. You gave him up, but I lived like a clown. Always your side character." The desperation in her voice was pitiable. She had defined her entire existence across 2 lifetimes in relation to me and to a man. She had never once considered building something of her own. I felt a strange pang of something that wasn't quite pity. It was the detached sadness one feels for a creature that has trapped itself. I opened the live comments on my phone, a function I had learned to access at will, and held the screen up for her to see. "Look," I said softly. The text scrolled, a river of opinions from the unseen audience that had witnessed our entire drama. No wonder Elara could turn everything around. Her strength comes from within. This is true heroine energy. I'm her fan for life. Being a heroine isn't about status, but about an unshakable heart. Celeste had every advantage and squandered it. Elara built an empire from nothing. Celeste's eyes widened, scanning the text, her face a canvas of shock, disbelief, and finally, a crushing, devastating comprehension. She was seeing the narrative verdict, and it was not in her favor. She had always believed she was the star of the show, but the audience had chosen a different lead. I don't understand," she whispered, her defiance crumbling into dust. "They all say I'm just your supporting role," I said, lowering the phone. "But I don't care. Because I live my life the way I want." I turned my back on her for the last time and walked toward the hospital's main entrance. The sunlight outside was blinding, a clean, sharp light that promised nothing but what I made of it. It felt like a promise of the brilliant, unencumbered future that was now irrevocably mine. And there waiting for me at the curb was Maya. She wasn't just my first employee or my protégée. She was my partner, my friend, the one who had chosen to stand with me not out of obligation or family duty, but because she believed in what we were building together. I broke into a run, faster and faster, the hospital and the ghosts of my past falling away behind me. The comments for a moment swelled into a final roaring cheer. The world after the hospital was sharper, clearer, as if a persistent haze had finally lifted. With the Vance family drama officially concluded, all my energy funneled into Ethel. The seed funding was a spark, but we needed a blaze. We worked out of a converted garage near campus, the air thick with the smell of coffee and ambition. Liam managed our burn rate with the precision of a bomb disposal expert. Chloe's data models grew more elegant and powerful by the day. Maya was the bedrock, her code so clean and efficient it was like poetry. And I was the conductor, orchestrating our symphony of talent, strategy, and sheer will. We were no longer just a student project. Our platform for collaborative academic research was gaining real traction. Small labs and independent researchers, often overlooked by larger, clunkier systems, were our early adopters. They loved its intuitive design and powerful AI-driven matching system that connected disparate datasets and methodologies. The comments, which had once been obsessed with my love life, were now fixated on our growth metrics. Look at their user retention rate. It's insane. I heard a professor in the bio department requires his entire lab to use it. This is actually changing how research is done. It's not just another app. One afternoon as I was knee-deep in user feedback, my phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize, but with a prestigious area code. Elara Vance, a smooth, professional voice inquired. Speaking. This is Robert Finch from Sequoia Capital. We've been following Ethel's progress. We're impressed. We'd like to discuss a Series A round. My heart didn't leap. It settled into a steady, powerful rhythm. This was it. The real validation. Sequoia wasn't just money. It was a stamp of approval that would echo through every boardroom in Silicon Valley. The meeting was a whirlwind. I walked into a sleek conference room overlooking the city with Liam, Chloe, and Maya flanking me. We were young, but we were prepared. We knew our numbers cold, our vision was crystalline, and our passion was palpable. We didn't need to sell them. We just had to show them the future we were already building. When we walked out 2 hours later, we had a term sheet. A generous one. The money was life-changing, but more than that, it was fuel. It meant we could hire more talent, scale our infrastructure, and stop worrying about how to pay for pizza on all-night coding sessions. The news broke in the tech blogs. Student-led Ethel secures major funding from Sequoia. The article mentioned my name, my role as CEO. It did not mention that I was adopted or that I had a sister, or that I had once been tangentially linked to Julian Landon. I was judged solely on what I had built. The comments under the article were a victory lap for my unseen supporters. I told you. I knew she was the real deal. From $1 million in her bank account to a company valued at 50 times that. Queen. This is the growth arc I'm here for. Forget the romance subplot. Meanwhile, the shadows of my past life were dimming. I heard through the grapevine that Celeste had dropped out of Stanford. The breakup with Julian, combined with the public humiliation of the fire and the private collapse of her family, had broken her. She was reportedly living off the allowance from the account I funded, adrift and bitter. Julian, I learned, had tried to start his own venture, a derivative social media app. It had fizzled out within 6 months. He was now working as a mid-level product manager at a stable, unremarkable tech firm. The boy who had once rung the NASDAQ bell was now optimizing button colors for a food delivery app. The irony was not lost on me or the comments. The male lead really fizzled out without Elara, huh? Turns out he was the supporting character in her story all along. I felt nothing for him. Not schadenfreude, not pity. He was a photograph from a forgotten vacation, faded and irrelevant. With the Sequoia money, we moved into a proper office space. It was a wide, open floor plan with floor-to-ceiling windows, flooded with light. On the day we moved in, I gathered the team, now 20 strong and growing. This is just the beginning, I told them, my voice carrying across the room. We're not just building a company. We're building a new way to accelerate human knowledge. Every line of code you write, every problem you solve, it matters. Thank you for believing in this. The applause was genuine, energizing. These people had chosen to follow me not out of familial obligation or romantic entanglement, but because they believed in the mission. It was a loyalty I had never known in my previous life. Later that night, after everyone had left, Maya stayed behind. We stood by the large window, looking out at the glittering lights of the city. "You did it, Ilara," she said softly. "You really did it." "We did it," I corrected, bumping her shoulder with mine. "None of this would exist without you. You were the first person who believed in me in this life." She smiled, a quiet, knowing look in her eyes. "You gave me my future. It was the easiest decision I ever made." We stood in comfortable silence for a long time, two women who had rewritten their destinies, watching the city that we were now poised to change. The ghosts were gone. The path ahead was illuminated, not by the reflected glow of someone else's legacy, but by the brilliant, unwavering light of our own creation. Ethel was no longer a startup. It was a force. And we were just getting started. Success, I discovered, was a tide that lifted all boats. Ethel's platform was now indispensable in dozens of research fields, from genomics to climate science. We were no longer a plucky startup. We were a cornerstone of the scientific community. The Series B funding round was not a fight for survival, but a curated selection of investors begging for a piece of the future we were building. It was during this period of stratospheric growth that I received an invitation that made me pause. The TechVision Summit, an exclusive invitation-only conference where the most powerful figures in global tech gathered not to pitch, but to pontificate. I was to be a keynote speaker. The comments, which had become a steady, supportive murmur in the background of my life, erupted in excitement. "The summit. This is the big leagues. She's going to be sharing the stage with legends. Our girl has arrived. I wonder if any ghosts from the past will be there." The latter comment gave me a moment's pause. It was possible. The tech world was a small pond and I was now one of the biggest fish. But the thought was fleeting. I had transcended that drama. The day of the summit, I stood backstage in a simple, impeccably tailored suit, my notes unnecessary in my mind. I was not nervous. I was poised. I was about to unveil Ethel 2.0, a suite of AI tools that would democratize complex data analysis in ways previously unimaginable. As I waited for my introduction, a familiar presence materialized beside me. "Ilara." It was Julian. He looked older, the boyish charm sanded away by the mediocrity of a career without passion. He was there as a plus one, a junior executive in a suit that cost more than his monthly salary. "You've built an empire," he said, his voice a mixture of awe and bitterness. "I have," I replied, my gaze fixed on the stage curtain. "I read about your parents," he continued, shifting uncomfortably. "The monthly payments. That was generous of you." "It was a transaction," I said, my tone leaving no room for sentiment. "A closed account." He was silent for a moment, the weight of his regret a physical thing between us. "I think about it all the time, you know. The last life. What we had. What I threw away by not seeing what was in front of me." Finally, I turned to look at him. "You didn't throw it away, Julian. You never truly had it. You had a capable partner who loved you, but your heart was always in a box of someone else's mementos." His face fell, the truth of it finally, devastatingly landing. There were no more excuses, no more timelines to blame. "And Celeste?" I asked, not because I cared but because I wanted him to say it aloud. He looked down at his shoes. She's not well. The money you send, she spends it on distractions. She's a ghost." I felt nothing. No triumph. No sorrow. They were both ghosts and I was living in the vibrant present tense. Before he could say more, my introduction began. A booming voice listed my accomplishments, the disruption I had caused, the future I was shaping. The applause as I walked onto the stage was a roaring wave that swallowed Julian's presence whole. The lights were blinding just like they had been at the NASDAQ. But this time I stood alone at the podium. I didn't need someone by my side to share the spotlight. I was the spotlight. I spoke for 30 minutes. I laid out a vision for the next decade, not of Ethel but of scientific progress itself and how our tools would be the engine. I unveiled the new AI, demonstrating its power with a live, complex dataset. The gasps from the audience were audible. I wasn't just announcing a product. I was announcing a new era. When I finished, the silence was absolute for a single breathless second. Then the room erupted. The standing ovation was immediate, thunderous. Cameras flashed, capturing the moment. Ilara Vance, alone at the pinnacle. Backstage, my phone buzzed incessantly with notifications. congratulations, interview requests, more term sheets. But one message stood out. It was from Maya, who had been watching the live stream with the entire Ethel team. "We are so proud of you. The future is here. And it's ours." I smiled, a true, unburdened smile. This was the only approval that mattered. As I prepared to leave, a tall, elegant woman with sharp eyes and a confident smile approached me. It was Isabella Rossi, the legendary, notoriously selective venture capitalist who had built her own empire from the ground up. "Elara Vance," she said, extending a hand. Her grip was firm. "That was not a speech. That was a manifesto. I've been watching Ethel for a while. I don't just want to invest, I want to offer my mentorship. There are challenges ahead that are beyond capital. They require wisdom." This was the final seal of approval from a woman who had never been a supporting character in anyone's story. "I would be honored, Isabella," I said. She leaned in slightly, her voice dropping. "They'll call you ruthless now, you know. For how you left your family, for how you handled your past entanglements." She waved a dismissive hand. "Ignore them. Ruthless is just the word men use for women who are decisive. You did what was necessary to protect your vision. Never apologize for it." Her words settled deep within me, a final absolution. I had reached the summit, and the view was everything I had ever dreamed of in my previous life, yet completely different. It was mine and mine alone. The unveiling was complete. Elara Vance, the orphan, the adopted daughter, the scorned woman, was gone. In her place stood only Elara Vance, the architect of the future. The story of my past was closed. The story of my legacy had just begun. The years after the TechVision Summit were a blur of controlled, exponential growth. With Isabella Rossi's guidance and our seemingly limitless capital, Ethel didn't just grow, it evolved. We became the silent, intelligent engine powering breakthroughs in medicine, renewable energy, and space exploration. The Ethel core was as fundamental to modern research as the microscope had once been. I stood in my office, now on the top floor of a shimmering skyscraper that bore our company's name, looking down at the city. It was a view I had once shared with Julian, but now it was all mine. The memory felt like it belonged to someone else. My assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Ms. Vance, the car is ready for the ceremony." Today was the day. The Ethel Foundation, a non-profit arm we had spun off to fund groundbreaking blue-sky scientific research, was announcing its first major grant recipients. We were funding 10 young, brilliant minds whose ideas were too radical for traditional grants. We were betting on the future. The venue was packed with the world's scientific elite, journalists, and philanthropists. As I took the stage, the applause was different from the summit years ago. It was warmer, filled with genuine respect. I wasn't just a disruptor anymore. I was an institution. "Thank you," I began, my voice calm and carrying. "We stand here today not to celebrate a company, but to celebrate potential. To celebrate the courage to ask questions that have no answers yet." I announced the recipients one by one. A physicist working on quantum gravity. A biologist editing genes to eradicate hereditary disease. A young woman, not unlike Maya had been, developing a new model for sustainable urban farming. With each name I felt a profound sense of completion. This was the point. This was why I had fought so hard, why I had shed the skin of my past life. It was never just about the money or the power. It was about building a platform so strong it could lift up the next generation of dreamers. After the ceremony, as I was surrounded by well-wishers, a frail older woman approached me, guided by a nurse. It took me a moment to place her. Beatrice Vance. She looked small and hollowed out, a shell of the society matron she once was. "Elara," she whispered, her voice thin. "I read about this. What you're doing. It's good." I looked at her, this woman who had once shredded my exam ticket, and felt a distant, quiet pity. "Thank you, Beatrice." She hesitated, wringing her hands. "Arthur, he passed last year." Quietly. "Celeste. She's in Switzerland. A clinic. She doesn't recognize anyone most days." She looked up at me, her eyes begging for a forgiveness I had long since granted and forgotten. "The money you send, it helps. It helps her." "I'm glad," I said, and I meant it. It was a clinical gladness, the satisfaction of a problem neatly and permanently solved. She seemed to understand that there was nothing more to say. She nodded once, a silent acknowledgement of the chasm between us, and let her nurse lead her away. Later that evening, I hosted a small, private dinner at my home for the grant recipients and my core team. Maya, now my chief technology officer, sat at my right hand laughing with the young physicist. Liam and Chloe were debating market strategies with the urban farmer. The room was buzzing with the energy of pure, unadulterated intellect and ambition. This was my family. This was my legacy. Not a bloodline but an idea. A chain of knowledge and opportunity that I had forged. As the party wound down, Maya and I stood on the terrace looking up at the stars. "Do you ever think about it?" she asked softly. "The other life?" I followed her gaze to the constellations. "Sometimes. Not as a life I lived but as a story I read once. A cautionary tale about living for someone else's script." She nodded. "You rewrote it. For both of us." I turned to Maya, linking my arm with hers. "Come on. We have a board meeting at 8. There's a new proposal on asteroid mining I want to run by you." She laughed, a sound of pure joy. "Always on to the next thing." "Always," I agreed. We walked back inside, leaving the stars behind. The past was a closed book. The future was a blank page and we were just beginning to write. The end.